Welcome to Potluck Politics. What's your plan, Joe? Or as I call it, chaos and the cure. We're glad to be able to talk with our Congressman Joe Courtney. Thank you very much, Joe, for spending time with us. I know you're busy. I know for a fact you're really busy, but we appreciate it. There's so much chaos going on in Washington these days and around the country, and we need some insider insight from you, so that's what we're looking for. There's so much happening all at once and everywhere, it's hard to know where to begin and how to respond. We have 3 topics we definitely want to cover today, and there's many more, as you know, that we could cover, but at least these. Budget cuts to the critical safety net, the war in Ukraine, I have my Ukraine flag on, and the tariffs. So let's get into it. First of all, the budget cuts. The roller coaster ride started with the Trump executive orders and Elon Musk with his gang of 20-something hackers invading most federal agencies, breaching data safeguards, and taking a chainsaw to critical programs. It's mind-boggling with cuts to FEMA, FAA, FDA, CDC, NOAA, and the VA. These agencies protect our food, our health, veterans, our air safety. Soon we won't even know what to expect from the weather. Aren't we suddenly much less safe as a nation?
So
I know it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I mean, your description of chaos, honestly, I think is the most accurate one-word description of what is going on right now, because you obviously have a president who is claiming executive powers that far exceed what I think the law, the Constitution, norms have ever suggested in the past. And so, how do you respond to that and how you fix that? I mean, the normal answer, traditional answer would be that, the Constitution has checks and balances, co-equal branches of government, and that's sort of the stabilizers that are supposed to sort of kick in a time like this. And so in terms of Congress, when the majority in both the House and the Senate are of the president's same party, and you have leadership which so far has just failed to exercise any real independence as far as bringing bills to the floor, having oversight of some of the actions that the president's been taking. I mean, it's been a struggle, but there definitely are some legislative areas which even he can't claim executive authority, like the tax code, Medicaid program coverage. Tariffs is something that is now possibly in play, and then obviously the budget, next year's budget, which we now are already getting sort of sneak peeks, and it's horrible in terms of what's coming out there. So on the tax issue and the Medicaid issue, that's something that Congress is actively voting on. In the budget reconciliation bill, we just had an authorization vote right before the break 2 weeks ago, which was decided in the House by 2 votes.
2 votes.
I mean, one Republican switching their vote would have actually stopped it dead in its tracks. And so they're clearly nervous about the damage that it's going to do to healthcare. And the coalition that's been created covers the whole gamut from hospitals to nursing homes, patient groups, doctors, community health centers. I mean, they are super energized and vocal about the fact that the $1 trillion cut that they want to pass to pay for their tax cuts, it's just going to do really irreversible harm to the system. I was at an event the other night, and a doctor just came up and just said, you don't like to sort of over dramatize. People will die, because of the damage that's going to be caused there. So anyway,
and probably more in red states than blue states, really.
Absolutely.
The Republicans are going to suffer from this.
Yeah, so Connecticut, as you know, Medicaid's a jointly funded program. It's 50-50 here in Connecticut, but other states with lower income actually get a higher federal match, like Mississippi is
which
like 70%.
Comes from the blue states.
Exactly. So you're right. I mean, they're going to take the hit even bigger, and so. But we have more votes coming in terms of actually the final law that's necessary.
Yeah, that was just sort of a guideline, wasn't
correct.
it? That they passed so far.
And that's when this thing.
It's going to get harder for them.
Very hard, and it's going to get very hard for New York Republicans, California Republicans. They've already started to, state their public opposition to it. Again, we've heard some of that already, and they kind of cave at the last minute. So we'll just sort of see how that goes. Other DOGE efforts, like the assault on Social Security, basically canceling money that's already been lawfully appropriated. There's definitely, our caucus has been very visible and vocal, in my opinion, in terms of really putting their feet to the fire. DOGE under Musk has talked about, and they've already announced, cutting 7,000 employees at Social Security, which is already understaffed. Martin O'Malley, who's the administrator from the Biden administration, said that if you really look at it closely, it's going to be 10,000. So our office does a lot of work with constituents. We have the highest number of Social Security beneficiaries of the 5 districts in Connecticut, 165,000 people. And there's already really unacceptable wait times in terms of getting appointments, getting on the phone, appeals in the disability area. I mean, this is what they're doing is they're basically hollowing out the program and damaging it. But I will say this, the public backlash that came out when they said that they're going to turn off the phones, they had to reverse course, because even their own members.
There are a number of things now that they're having to pull back because
exactly.
people are
So I think
in.
that for people who are really upset, and believe me, they call the office, the public opinion still does account for something. And the lawsuits that have been filed also, I was with William Tong twice this week, who's part of that Connecticut
Attorney General's
group and has doing outstanding work that's there. But there's about 85 restraining orders that have been put in to block implementation. We just saw over the wire as I was walking in here, that the lawsuits blocking the cancellation of student visas has now the government's actually withdrawn its position there and are going to allow. So there were 13 students up at UConn whose visas were canceled arbitrarily, and I mean we're trying to figure out whether or not they're in that group that's going to be restored. That's happening there. So the Supreme Court, at least on paper, supported the Garcia case from Maryland, and now it's back in the contempt phase. That's going to be really, I think, kind of a moment of truth for our country about the balance of power and the checks and balances. But
I have some confidence, but not strong confidence.
Yeah,
the Supreme Court's going to do the right thing.
But I think Roberts cares about the institution, and if he does, then he can't.
And nobody wants to have someone, flagrantly say, "Screw you, we're going to do what we want."
But again, they've disappointed us in the past, so you can't sort of count on that. But if there ever is a moment where the message that elections matter, I mean, we're in it right now.
Yeah. One part of this that I want to talk about a little bit is, a lot of this stuff that's happening involves data breaches. Musk seems to be doing a lot of self-mining of information, and could you talk about that a little bit? What are the repercussions for the long run? Because it sounds like every agency, they're doing things that they shouldn't have even had access to.
And that's where, again, I think the court rulings have been mixed, in terms of slowing that down. Social Security obviously is the ultimate crown jewels of data in our country, because everybody who's born,
and the IRS, and those two are pretty important.
Right, but even at birth, you're getting sort of enrolled into the system, that's there. So everybody's in it. As I was telling students at Grasso Tech the other day, this isn't an issue about old people on Social Security. Right. It affects everybody, and so that system has always been treated almost like a military operation in terms of it's classified, off limits, interaction with staff and personnel, and for DOGE to kind of come crashing through and saying, we want to have that as part of our Department of Government Efficiency, which is the biggest misnomer in history. Really it was a threat, and so the court initially, totally blocked them, and then, further hearings, they kind of allowed them some limited access. I don't even like that, because aside from, the risk of privacy being released, it's a very fragile system in terms of IT technology. It's an old system, COBOL, And
it's expensive
and
to
it's
fix
a target,
it, so they haven't fixed it.
and it's a target of hackers, who even from countries overseas, or just bad actors, who are individually trying to get into it. So the more you sort of allow other sort of opportunities for people to hack into that system, it's really dangerous in terms of people's financials and health information, all that. So and to you're right. I mean, all the other agencies that are getting getting doged.
Well, the National Labor Relations Board sounds like they exported a whole lot of information. No one knows what they took and why and what they're doing with it.
That's right. And so
it may have been Russian bots that got in because they screwed up all the security.
Right. No, I saw Rachel's show where she talked about that, and it's as I said, the public reaction to Doge and to Musk, though, to me, again, I think has been pretty impressive, is that, people, are not sort of, they're paying attention, and they've,
I didn't cancel my Tesla, but if I was going to get one, I would have canceled it by now.
That's right.
And people are paying attention.
No, and
right.
I think he is a discredited figure right now, and I think, has decided at least to pull back to some degree. So, all of this is, I think, really in record time damaged Trump's political standing in the country. I mean, he was in the mid-50s on Inauguration Day in terms of approval. It was kind of the natural honeymoon, or that I guess you'd say is in politics. But now he's the lowest approval rating in the first 100 days in history. And his handling of the economy, which was always his, supposed strong suit, is now his biggest weakness in terms of how he's basically lit the global economy on fire with this insane tariff regime.
Yeah, as of last night and this morning, I think the polls are showing that the only thing he's above water in is border security, but not in immigration even anymore.
Right, exactly.
But I want to just give you a chance to talk a little bit about waste and fraud. And I know, there's waste and fraud in government, and any organization has issues, and there are a lot of built-in agencies that look into that and have I think rooted that out in many cases. But do you think that going in and lopping off big sections of these agencies and firing all these people is actually going to do anything about fraud and waste?
Absolutely not. I mean,
like
that approach is in fact going to increase waste. And I mean, the sort of poster child was the National Nuclear Safety Administration, which basically is the handlers of nuclear warheads.
As Rachel would say, whoops.
Yeah, and they, after the blowback, they tried to scramble and get these people back, but they didn't get them all back. Yeah. And I mean,
they didn't have addresses or contact because they just. Yeah.
But again, so my guest to the State of the Union, or presidential address, was a guy from Vernon, who was a Marine Corps veteran, 4 days away from completing his probationary status, had perfect rankings, from his supervisor in terms of the work that he did. Yeah. He was in charge of property management, and there's like 6 really relatively large properties in Connecticut. So they loved him. He gets a notification that clean out your desk. You got 2 hours and turn in your computer. Again, he was 4 days away from completing probationary status, but because he was in probationary status, they all got lopped off. To your point, and I mean, his supervisor, was really upset and wanted him to stay. There was a lawsuit. He sort of got restored, but never got really restored. And he wanted to stay on the job there, but he took a job with the town of Manchester. So yeah, there's no Doge goal that was served by having a guy like that. By the way, he voted for Trump, and he openly talked about that and how he felt betrayed, as a veteran.
So we've talked a little bit about Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. In the past, I think those have been considered to be sort of do not touch issues, and yet they're going after them. We talked about the Republican budget is predicated on something big getting cut, and it's going to be probably Medicaid, who knows what else. But I just saw and the reason for doing this is billionaires are going to get more money, which is ridiculous. There was a thing in the day just recently, in the London Day, Connecticut billionaires have seen their wealth grow by 61% since 2017. So they're making money, and why on earth we change the whole government so they get more money doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I mean,
Can you talk about that and what your constituents think of that?
And there's no question that the public does not support giving the top 0.1%, or 1%, or even top 5%, extended tax breaks or even bigger tax breaks. So what's the reason why this is such an issue for Trump and his cronies is that when they passed the Trump tax cut in 2017, it sunsets in December of this year.
It's running out.
And so, that has been from the day Mike Johnson got the gavel as Speaker, the number 1, 2, and 3 priority is to get those tax cuts for his donors and buddies extended. And so, but it costs about $5 trillion to do it for over a 10-year period of time, which is on top of the existing borrowing that we're already doing as a nation right now. The interest costs on the national debt, the annual interest cost is getting close to $1 trillion, which is actually more than the Department of Defense and more than Medicare's annual expenditures that are there. And his bill will actually add to that debt on top of it. So
the people who care so much about the deficit never do anything about it when they get a chance.
Exactly. And but when you're seeing interest payments of that magnitude, I mean, this actually does create a real problem. So the sensible thing to be doing is saying we're not going to keep, extending these tax cuts that, and really they're only talking about reinstating the top marginal rate that Bill Clinton put into place at roughly 39 to 40%, and which under Obama were reinstated. Those were high growth economies when that happened. It did not cripple, jobs or. So, it's the obvious choice in terms of trying to bring down the debt, and instead they're going the opposite direction, which is just to make it worsen the problem that's there. So, to offset it and pay for it, that's why they're going after Medicaid because they think that one's easier to demonize because it's for poor people who don't want to work.
The states have to contribute.
That's right. And but the fact is Medicaid now is bigger than even Medicare in terms of the number of people on it. And as I said, the coalition of folks that have come together, governors and Republican governors, I think are starting to wake up.
Don't cut my Medicaid.
Right, exactly, because it's going to create a budget mess for them back home. And Ned Lamont, certainly has been watching that particular item, because Connecticut gets about $6 billion a year in Medicaid payments out of Washington, and if this thing goes through, that's about a 20 to 25% cut, right across the board for the state's budget, which. Even the rainy day fund is as strong as it is in Connecticut. I mean, we would blow through that in no time fast.
Well, as far as Social Security, I really want to thank you. You did an event in London at the Social Security office, which we still have, thank goodness.
Yep.
And it was a good turnout on a bit of a rainy day. But thank you for doing that. I did have my sign here.
Nice.
My Social Security card facsimile, and that's hopefully I'll get that up on the screen. But I was happy to be there for you. Thank you for doing that. A topic that's near and dear to me is Russia and Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine, and make that clear. It's been 3 years now. We stand for Ukraine every Saturday, pretty much. The people are so nice, and this is so unfortunate. It's just because Putin wants to increase his power. He wants to damage those European countries around Ukraine, and he'll go after them next. And he really wants to kill democracy and undermine NATO. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
I'm sure you weren't surprised that he didn't come up with a solution to the Ukraine war on day one, and he's still not.
Right.
And now he's taking on Putin's position, basically.
No, it's really like a Munich kind of moment in terms of just appeasing, a dictator who, as you point out, has no intention of stopping. Even if this deal that the U.S. has put on the table were actually to go into effect. I mean, the things that's so awful about this package that he put in is it basically acknowledges that Crimea, which Putin seized in 2014, would be legally recognized. Our country has not done that since going back to the 1940s. We have never recognized the illegal
stolen land
annexation of property anywhere in the world, whether it's in Africa or Asia or and certainly in Europe. It's sickening actually to sort of watch.
And to have our president talking about taking over Greenland or taking over Panama Canal,
right?
It's like that's not what we do.
No.
That's not America.
And to your point, I mean I had a chance to meet Zelensky once, and he really is just saying, just let us, give us the tools so that we can defend our country. Period. He's not asking for boots on the ground or intervention.
And they have fought so hard. It's amazing.
In the last package that we passed for Ukraine, actually Johnson was speaker, and they were able to get through to him. It was interesting because the faith-based groups in Ukraine, they're very religious people. I mean, my wife and I go up to the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Willimantic.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that. Yeah.
But anyway, they sort of got through to Johnson about the fact that, if you look at the areas Russia has taken over, I mean, one of the first things he's gone after is the churches. They're there. And so it seemed like, he had really kind of turned a corner in terms of at least letting us vote on giving them aid. But the minute Trump came into office, it's just a completely different tune. And, they're just, like you said, spouting out all the talking points that Putin is putting out there. And, the claim that we're just sending cash over there, which, my opponent in the last election kept sort of touting. The fact is the money gets spent here in the U.S. in terms of munitions.
We're upgrading our weapons, actually.
Right. And the Europeans now have surpassed us in terms of their, because that was also another criticism, was that, Europe's not doing enough. So it's, again, not having the gavel, because if Hakeem Jeffries was speaker, we would have a package on the floor tonight, to support Ukraine. But we're doing our best to try and embarrass a lot of these sort of particularly older line Republicans who, you're watching a Republican president support a Russian KGB agent and brag about being the apple of his eye and all this stuff, which is, for that party.
I know.
It's just another.
I'm old enough, but I remember the Republicans' whole thing was anti-Russia, anti-communism, anti-dictators. Off the edge. I want to talk a little about, I think we're running out of time, but tariffs are a huge deal, and I think that's also working really against Republicans and Trump. You want to talk a little bit about that and the economic problems, and
so again, this is a case where
it's legal.
he is blatantly exceeding his authority. I mean, the Constitution is very clear. Article 1, Section 8. That's Congress's authority to impose taxes, tariffs, and he's claiming emergency authorities.
There is no emergency.
Canada's not invading us. Australia is not, at war with us, and Europe isn't. And it's amazing how that crazy chart that he was, waving around a couple weeks ago on Liberation Day. Really it was our friends and allies that were actually, getting targeted more than Russia has zero tariffs that are there.
Like
so anyway, the damage that's being done, particularly in rural America, you're now starting to see Republican members of Congress finally, poking their heads up. Grassley in the Senate has filed a bill to require congressional review, which is the way it should be. Don Bacon from Nebraska in the House, same thing. And I'm sure, being home for 2 weeks, they're getting an earful, because rural America really is taking it on the chin.
Yeah.
I was just with a home builder here just before I came to the studio. Price of floorboards, which is made with Canadian composite wood. It's gone up 30% since Liberation Day. Some of the metal fasteners and pieces that are again imported, 80% increase. So it's going to end up the consumer and the home buyer is going to end up paying for that. So it's he's threatening a recession, and it's also, we're going to see inflation. That's the toxic stagflation economy, which
it's totally the opposite of what we need.
Right.
I mean, we had an economy that was great, and he's destroyed it, and I don't think he's going to get it back. But we need to talk a little bit about the deportations.
Yes.
We're getting down to 5 minutes here. Quickly talk about the situation and especially anything in Connecticut that you know about.
So again, the cancellation of student visas has been all over the news, and
these are people who came here to study at our
Right.
universities, and many universities depend a lot on that influx of
again,
basically
and no
customers.
due process.
Right.
Just like all of these cases,
No good
where
reason.
ICE is just and the 14th Amendment is very clear that any person is entitled to due process. Doesn't say just citizens or just any person.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And what is due process?
I mean, due process is basically, having the government sort of justify, detaining someone
and give you a chance to
deporting
defend
us.
yourself.
Correct. So the Mr. Garcia, who was never a member of any gang,
Mhm.
would have had an opportunity to actually set the record straight, as opposed to, accusations
hearsay,
based
yeah.
on anonymous tips from 10 years ago, or a tattoo. And so, and what happened with the student visas is that I think the government realized how untenable its position was, and so there was an announcement again just a few minutes ago that they are at least for those who have even misdemeanors or infractions, that they're going to have their status restored. That's there, and frankly, there were some cases where people didn't have any infractions that were getting swept up and grabbed. And again, the decision's so new, people are still trying to sort of sort it out and figure out whether that woman up in Boston who
Went to
attended
your
Tufts
school.
University.
I know, we had that in
who,
here.
I mean, it was a frightening video of her just getting,
Yeah, they just picked her up on the street with no charges, no reason.
So, but anyway, I mean, it shows these lawsuits are actually have value. What would be nice is to have the other branch of government, the legislative branch, get in the game
I know.
here in terms of rebalancing. And with the exception of that, like I said, that sign of life on tariffs, it's still, we got work to do.
Well, I really appreciate the fact Democratic senators and some people from Congress have gone to El Salvador and to the holding prison in Louisiana. And I guess I want to ask you directly if you would be considering doing that
Absolutely.
yourself.
So Glenn Ivey, who's a Democratic member from Maryland, he organized a letter to Trump, basically a very simple message: obey the law and return him, which I was, happily signed on to. There's definitely amicus briefs that members of Congress can sign, and on a lot of the litigation that's there, which certainly joining on. And I would defer to Glenn just to sort of see if he was going to organize a trip like that. But no, absolutely, being there, present, having the media.
It seems really valuable because it gets on the
totally
press
does.
and it gets explained.
Chris Van Howen's a terrific guy, and he was in the House, and I think it really mattered.
Quickly, anything you want to urge our viewers to do to help out with?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing is that
We're
there's
down
so
to
much
less than a
happening.
minute. So.
There's so much is happening and so fast. People have individual cases, like that guy that I was telling you about from Vernon, that we wouldn't have known about except he picked up the phone and called. And we really encourage
communication
people.
is good.
Communications, like that home builder, talking about the impact of tariffs, or people who, the Department of Education being wiped out in terms of what that means to local school budgets, or Perkins grants that are helping with kids who are in tech schools. I mean, those are all federal grants that help these help the community in the area. So putting a localized, personalized face in terms of these policies, and I'm just scratching the surface. Wiping out AmeriCorps. The latest is going after the Older Americans Act with Meals on Wheels and programs like that. So we encourage people to call the office. The rallies do make a difference. I really believe that. It makes the other side very nervous to see that kind of visible grassroots efforts that are there, and support groups like Democracy Forward, which is one of the groups that's doing the lawsuits. I guess I'm not supposed to do that, but talk about. But really, they're heroes in my book.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay,
As usual, we have more to talk about than we have time.
Yeah, we'll come back,
but we'll have you back anytime. Congressman Joe Courtney, we really appreciate what you're doing, and glad you could come here to help shed some light. It's great. You have the view from Washington, and we need to hear about it. So I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. I'm Peter Rope with Potluck Politics, urging you all to donate to SCC TV. We need funds to keep this going. Get informed, involved, and be well. And just say no to Trump.
Thanks, Peter.